Good morning. I'm here with Gary Bradfield, my co-director of Phoenix Bonds.
And I'm here with Hannah van Deventer. Morning, Hannah, also from Phoenix Bonds.
Morning, Gary. So today, for episode 2 of our podcast, we want to talk about pre-qualifications. So what is a pre-qualification? Why is it important? And what's involved in that assessment? I'm going to kick off with you, Gary. What is a home loan pre-qualification? We talk about pre-quals all the time. What actually is involved?
Okay, great. Good question, and it's become something that's all the more topical and important as well, Hannah, is this notion of a pre-qualification, and actually what does it mean, what does it all guarantee? But in its simplest form, again, a pre-qualification seeks to assess a client's financial situation, credit history, bank conduct, and employment status for the purposes of arriving at a predetermined loan amount or home loan amount that the client would qualify for. And in its simplest form, it seeks to really just give some form of peace of mind to the purchase process prior to putting pen to paper.
So it's not a guarantee. It's basically our assessment of what that purchaser can afford in terms of a home loan. I get asked all the time, what's the difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval? And the answer is nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Banks
sometimes issue a pre-approval. We do pre-qualifications. It doesn't matter where it comes from, but the importance is it needs to be a full assessment.
Correct.
So, purchasers can go online and they can type in their income and expenses and not do a credit check and get a qualified amount. And that's where, there's issues with that because we haven't done a full assessment. So it doesn't matter what you call it, you just need to ensure that it's been done by a professional and a full credit check has been completed.
And I think that probably begs the question, what would be seen as a professional pre-qualification in your view, Hannah?
I would say a bond originator. So it's important to get a pre-approval at your bank if you're going to go to your bank, et cetera, et cetera. But the bank is only assessing that pre-approval in terms of their criteria. A bond originator understands all the bank's criteria. So they can assess you, how much would you qualify at FNB is different to how much you would qualify at Standard Bank because their criteria is different.
Correct.
And their LTVs are different.
That's very important, actually. It's a good point that you're making. Absolutely.
Yep.
Because I've heard, and you mentioned that just now, but, these sites that one can visit on the internet that when you punch in a gross earning amount, it simply responds with a loan amount that you would qualify for. And of course, if that's the extent to which the pre-approval or pre-qualification is done, that's actually a very dangerous practice. It creates expectation, I think, which are very seldom going to be fulfilled because that is just not a pre-approval.
So a single number, a single qualifying amount is dangerous. You can't just say you qualify for this. Pre-qualifications, they by nature are in-depth assessments and they must come with detailed feedback. I know that's what we do at Phoenix Bonds. We give a number, but we give your chances of approval at this amount would be different to this amount. Are there any LTV restrictions? Are there any income exclusions? So we do use these acronyms quite a lot in our industry because we know them so well. But I want to talk a little bit about LTV and PTI.
Okay.
Because they are two important things when it comes to pre-qualifications.
Absolutely.
Let's start with PTI or RTI, depending on which origination company you come from. So we're talking about your repayment to income, your bond repayment to your gross
why is that
income.
So important?
That is important because it's sort of like a quick affordability check for banks, for originators. So essentially, the banks say they don't like to go over. You take 30% of your gross income, and that is what is available to you for a bond repayment. They don't like to go over that. They can go over that for a very good client with good credit scoring. They will go over it, but it's sort of like a quick check.
Sort of like the golden standard. We'll do 30% of gross income.
Yep.
And that we can refer to as buying power.
Buying power.
Absolutely. Then affordability, of course, is completely different because affordability looks at where the rubber hits the road really, so to speak, and that looks at what is the net in a bank statement, and is that net sufficient to cover existing financial commitments, living expenses, realistic living expenses, and the proposed home loan. And importantly, is there a surplus after that equation? Should an interest rate in the market go up, would a client be able to absorb that into their financial family budget in order to still be able to stay financially intact?
Yep. So I think that's where some purchasers and some originators go wrong with their assessments of a pre-qualification. They basically say gross income less deductions, less accounts, less living expenses. There's the amount left over, and that's what's available for the bond repayment.
And of course, we know that that isn't.
That is a very dangerous way of doing an assessment.
What impacts LTV that the banks would offer? And we know that LTV refers to, it's expressed as a percentage, and it refers to the loan to value. LTV, acronym, loan to value, and it simply means what percentage of the full purchase price would a bank consider. So if you bought for $1 million and they gave you $1 million, that's 100% LTV. What impacts that?
So it's the type of applicant. Sometimes it could be related to the property, but most of the time it's the type of applicant and their perceived risk. So for example, foreigners without any visas or residency status in South Africa, as a blanket rule, must provide 50% of the purchase price.
Interesting.
They're only eligible for a loan amount of 50%.
Okay.
Contractors sometimes at certain banks are downgraded to 80%, and similarly with self-employed applicants at certain banks will only be eligible for an 80% loan.
And of course, banks do that responsibly in order to mitigate and to control risk. So there needs to be an equity buffer in that property due to factors which pose more risk perhaps than others. Why use Phoenix bonds for pre-approvals?
So I think that our pre-approvals, like I said before, we're very detailed in what we do. We ask for all the same documents that you would need for an application. We do a full credit check. So there's two types of credit checks. There's the soft check, which doesn't leave an inquiry on the bureau, but it just gives you the credit scoring and it doesn't give you any information about the payment history. That's very dangerous. So as a rule, for every applicant, we do the full credit check and we get the full payment history, and we can give very accurate LTV restrictions in terms of credit scoring.
And of course, we also request all the documentation that we would ordinarily request for a full application. The benefit of that being, obviously, we provide then a very comprehensive and well-considered pre-qualification, which then leads also to a very quick turnaround time once a deed of sale has been concluded, because we're in possession of all the documentation.
Exactly, and that's the purpose of the pre-qualification, to prepare the client to get ready for their application.
Absolutely.
And one thing that we need to talk to purchasers about as soon as we get a client, I feel like there's certain things they don't want to tell us because they don't want it to affect their application. And that's one distinction that we need to be very careful of. We are not the banks.
Yeah.
We are assisting you on behalf of the banks. So we're on your side.
Absolutely, always.
Yeah.
And to end off, why is a pre-approval why does it sometimes not result in an approval on a home loan application? What can go wrong with a pre-approval?
Look, at Phoenix Bonds, not much, because our assessment is very detailed to begin with. But there are certain things that you can't see. Sometimes it's to do with the property type. It might be in a complex that the financials are not in order.
Absolutely.
Certain banks might know about it and the others might not, but we have had that before where banks restrict lending in a certain complex. And also, if they have over 30% of the bonds in that complex, they'll just flat out say, no, our exposure's too high.
Yeah.
We're not lending anymore in that complex. So there's certain things to do with the property. There's certain things to do with the applicant that we sometimes can't see. We can't see their entire banking history with a certain bank. Particularly with applicants that have banked and moved through all the banks. And you can see they haven't really behaved well at all the banks.
So to end off then, I think three things, Hannah, so that we could safely say that a pre-approval is an absolute must if you're going to look for a property. Secondly, that there are times that a pre-approval will not result in a home loan application. Very few and far between, but there are times. And I think then, most importantly, considering a pre-approval and getting ready to purchase a property, there seems to be only one originator that really stands out in terms of efficiency and doing a comprehensive pre-qualification. That would be Phoenix, I think it's fair to say.
It is fair to say. The only way you'll know that is to actually give us a go.
Absolutely.
And see what you think. You can make up your own mind.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gary. Cheers.
Bye-bye.